Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Pastor Adam Thompson, pastor of Capital City Baptist Church in Austin, Texas. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been preaching for us for our missions conference, and I'm so glad that you're here. Your preaching has been tremendous and been very convicting, and I think that's what everybody needs at a missions conference. It's one of those things that just, hits you right where it counts, and I appreciate all the preaching that you've done. And I wanted to bring you in and just talk with you about your ministry. You've been a missionary for 15 years, Argentina, Mexico, and now you've pastored for 15 years. And I think there's something special about a pastor who had been a missionary on the foreign field, now pastoring in the United States, and just that burden that a pastor has for missions and translating that to his church. And so that's what I want to talk about, just how to translate a burden for missions to your people. Maybe there's a pastor out there who's trying to get, a missions-minded church, and he's trying to, show them the need and impress upon them the need. And so maybe we'll start talking about, but what is Capital City Baptist Church? What do they do for missions? And as far as activity and giving and all of that is concerned, and then we can talk about how that was instilled.
I think really any church is going to be missions-minded. It all starts with leadership. And coming from the mission field, you just naturally come in with a heart for missions.
Yes, sir.
And I know many pastors some have never even been able to take a missions trip. Mm-hmm. So we kind of had a head start. The church, when I inherited it, already had a heart for missions.
Okay.
And I was just able to build off that previous foundation. Mm-hmm. But when I came in, I told our people, listen, our whole focus from the school to the Bible college, everything we do is going to revolve around missions and reaching the world with the gospel. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of that is definitely missions trips and creating a philosophy in a church. Everyone ought to have a passport. Now in Texas, we're close to Mexico. Mm-hmm. That's an easy trip. Now, since traveling might be a little bit more dangerous, even a flight from San Antonio to Mexico City, we're just outside of Mexico City with a couple of churches that I planted. It's a 2-hour flight. We just took a group of 35 kids down. It's cheap, it's easy, very effective, but the impact, I could never understate the impact that has on everyone. Now, it has to be a good trip with the right people.
Sure.
I've seen missions trips that had a negative impact because it wasn't the right time or the right place or the right missionary, the right circumstance. But getting those kids to truly see what is happening around the world, it opens their eyes. And it creates gratitude. That's not the purpose of it, but seeing the poverty, seeing the need, and then seeing churches that are well established. I believe if you're not helping a church plant, it's very important to be with a missionary that's well established. Mm-hmm. You're seeing the blessings of longevity. So that is one of the biggest things that we emphasize every other year. Our teens, 8 through 12, grade, they take a missions trip. Every year, our entire college takes a missions trip. I take 3 to 4 mission trips a year and take different people with me. Our staff will normally take mission trips and take people with them. Mm-hmm. So that's constantly putting it in the hearts of people, stirring up, because you're seeing your investment. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to see a prayer letter. It's another thing to stand on a property, see a building that you helped build, see a ministry that you helped start, see a missionary that you've invested in for 20 years. And then I think, obviously, one of the biggest areas that helps the church is a good missions conference. Mm-hmm. And once again, a poor missions conference has a negative impact.
Sure.
A good missions conference, we do our Sunday to Sunday. Mm-hmm. We have 23 services. I'll have 10 special speakers. And here's what I want. I don't want this to be men that walk in with theory. I want it to be men that have been on the mission field, men that have invested. I'm looking for pastors whose churches have given $1 million plus to missions or if not, they're on track because their whole heart is set on reaching the world. So that is really contagious.
Yeah, absolutely.
And getting, we're in a day and age where, regrettably, the attrition is very noticeable right now. Missionaries coming off the field. And so we have fewer and fewer missionaries. The good ones don't want to come home. So at a missions conference, the problem is, I believe it's very important to have a good group of veteran missionaries that are high impact. And normally that means I'm going to have to fly some of them home. And it's more costly, but in the long run, it is more productive to have someone in their 60s or 70s. When they speak, people listen. Their stories are high impact. Their lives are high impact. And so we started probably 10 years ago. We'll fly several off the field just for that moment. And we like getting our teens around them. One of the reasons I went to the mission field was because Brother Bob Johnston to Haiti, Brother Rick Martin, sat with me as a teenager. Said, Adam, have you ever considered the mission field? And those conversations went further than any message or any missions conference. So during that week, all day, every day, we combined the School to Bible College where they are with those 15 missionaries we have in literally from morning until late in the evening, just so there's a personal impact as well in that.
Wow. Going back to missions trips, and I'd like to address also the missions conference and then the school aspect of it as well. Someone who takes a missions trip for the first time, what are their comments about, man, I've never taken a missions trip, and this is how it impacted me? What has been maybe a common response from those?
It's always positive. It's always overwhelming. Okay. Now, I've been a missionary. You need to make sure you have the right host, the right balance of projects. You know, there needs to be some kind of conference. There has to be a purpose and has to be a good man. And it can be a bad experience. You may get sick, you may have something happen, but overall it needs to be a very pleasant experience. But whether that's sending a team over to build a building or host an evangelistic conference or help start a church, we want to make sure we're sending the right people for that project or for that missions trip.
Because each one has a different purpose.
Right.
Okay.
Every time, we may be hosting a vacation Bible school or a junior camp or building a building, but every time, some of our best services are when those people come back and we have them stand up. And all of them, you have grown men, they can't help but weep. Sing, it takes a lot of preparation and it takes money. But the impact, I can't even explain what that does in the heart of a person that no message or no slide presentation can do. So if a church is not involved in missions trips, here's what they're going to see. Very few of their young people called. Very few of their young people touched. A missions conference is very limited, and normally its impact will last very short term. So unless that missionary is personally involved during the week and you see young men called or burdened, and throughout the year, there are groups of 2 or 3 college students specifically sent to help certain missionaries. But that long-term impact, it's long-term. Yeah. It's not the 3-day, 7-day, 10-day impact that you see from other events throughout the year.
How long should a missions trip typically last? A couple weeks, week and a half?
No. I always tell people 7 days.
A 7 day.
Now, if it's Philippines or Africa, somewhere that takes 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back, now you're talking 10 days. But people getting out of their comfort zone and for a missionary to host a group longer than a week,
that's a burden on them.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it becomes rough to keep people that. What we normally do, we do a project, we do an event, and then a day of sightseeing. Mexico, we were close to the pyramids, or Mexico City. We had lakes or whatever they would like to do. And I think that's important, but at the same time, it's got to be well planned. Anything beyond a week, normally it starts to go downhill quickly because the missionary doesn't have that kind of time. And kids, if you're taking young people or college students or married people, it's someone outside the United States, that gets long.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're choosing the place to take your missions trip, you're you're calling in advance, a year in advance,
Yes.
and you're saying, hey, we want to bring a group. Can we be a blessing? Can we be a help? And he says, actually, we don't have any projects going on right now. Okay, all right, well, thanks, and we'll keep
Usually, because we support hundreds of missionaries,
Yeah.
and I preach missions conferences, I'm more connected
Yeah.
than the average pastor.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to do their homework. And what I do, I always have 4 or 5 missionaries and places in mind. And we're talking down the road, okay, what's a good time of the year to come? When can we be, helpful to you in the ministry? You got to take weather into the thought process. Is this a good time of year? If you're meeting up in a mountain village, are we dealing with rain conditions, the expense? We've taken groups to the Philippines because at the time we could get tickets for, $700 or Brazil. We've done countries like that. I like to keep a missions trip around $1,200. Most people can do a $1,200 trip. So you've got to consider all those. And if you don't know good missionaries and you're just randomly picking, is probably going to be a bad experience. You really have to be picky about someone that's been there long enough, knows how to host, and take a group that you can actually travel with. And you get your hands on 2 vans. What are the legalities of insurance? And, so all those things have to come into play when you're making a decision.
So if you've never organized a trip before, maybe call someone who
get with someone who knows. It'll just help you in the process.
Okay. So, your eye affects your heart.
Absolutely.
And no doubt, I think seeing the mission field would not only give them a burden, but also alleviate any abstract ideas that people have about the missions. Because I imagine that people are like, oh, man, I'm going to have to eat bugs. What am I going to have to do? And they can go, oh, I guess it's not that bad. It's like a camping trip. Cool. Right. I'm not sure what they're going to equate it to, but it's going to take whatever unknown is out of their mind out. Now, talking about just the opportunity, what you do in your schools, is the for your college. They take that missions trip for your teenagers. It's not required for them, is it?
No, that's optional.
That's an optional thing.
Usually because the size of the youth group, we put qualifiers on the trip. So if you're not involved in soul winning, we'll have a devotional program. There are a lot of qualifiers to shrink the group. Right. You have to earn the right to go. Okay. A missions trip is not to drag you along. We don't need headaches on the trip. These are kids that are 100% behind, parents that are 100% behind. We need you to be a help.
So you qualify.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not down there to create a headache. And here's what I want to do. I want to teach our kids as young as possible to give. I want to be teaching them how to pray for missionaries. And so we want to be instilling these things in their hearts as young as possible, getting missionaries involved in chapel and in classes, bringing through as many as possible. I think all this is not one step, one moment. It really is a lifestyle of the leadership that is constantly bringing them, reintroducing them, helping them refocus.
So you just don't think about missions at missions conference
time. It can
time.
be once a year.
Yeah, it's brought up.
It's got to be all year, yes.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about just the level of giving, encouraging people, and you've done it here, done a great job of preaching and challenging us concerning giving. What are the challenges that you face? What are you trying to overcome when you preach, when you're encouraging people to be open-handed?
You can only preach that so much. The biggest impact is through the example set. And leadership has to be extremely generous. And they need to see, here's why we're so involved in projects. Most pastors have not helped budget or provoke in their members the desire to help with projects. That stirs excitement. So when you say, here's a need, here's a vehicle, we can give them $10,000 to help them buy that, or maybe half of that. There's an opportunity like in Ukraine with the war, suddenly those windows shut very quickly. Hey, let's get some Bibles, humanitarian help over there. We know 3 guys, we can get them $7,500 a piece or $5,000 or whatever. Those things help your people. During missions conference, here's what we've done. This took a life of its own in sponsorship. Our teenagers said, Pastor, can we sponsor? We'll raise money, not their missions faith promise, but we'll personally raise money. Let us hang on to that. When the missionary comes, we spoil them. Well, now we have 15 groups to do that. So
Yeah.
during missions conference, our teens, they get to take that money they raised. Right now it's $10,000 to $15,000.
Yeah.
So they take missionaries out, buy them suits, the ladies, shoes or dresses, or if they have a need, tires on their car. So they get to go see their money personally invested in the missionary. And that has created an incredible excitement.
Yeah.
And
Look at the missionary. Look at the suit he's wearing. I bought that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look what we were able to do, not just as a church, but individually.
So yeah, you've got just the regular Faith Promise Missions commitments that support missionaries on a monthly basis, but then you also have in person, just spoiling the missionaries as much as possible. You talked about projects and supporting projects. Is that done through special offerings, or is that done through Faith Promise Missions giving? You've got this much income, you support this many missionaries, and you have some kind of cushion where you can.
Right. We always have a cushion
Okay.
there for projects. And then if, during missions conference, we'll take up a special offering. We'll see many needs. And here's, sometimes it's $50,000 for a piece of land. Sometimes it really depends on the moment. One time we were taking on a missionary in Sierra Leone. I'm looking at the wife. I asked him, that's a tough country. How are you going to facilitate this woman feeling comfortable? Electricity's going off. Well, they're solar powered. Is that up to date? No. What would it take to get it up to date? $18,000. So we talked to his pastor, talked to the mission board, and we updated their solar power system so a wife and kids can go in and know they have electricity at least the majority of the time. So people get excited about that.
Yeah.
And because we have the other pastors, a lot of times a pastor will see that and say, hey, we'll help with this project as well. But that really creates an excitement that just the normal missions conference environment, excluding those ideas, it literally dies out in 3 days.
Yeah. And you can do those projects throughout the year.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be a missions conference.
No.
Yeah.
And we do it literally every month, 3 to 4 projects a month, and keeping the people informed, involved. And occasionally, I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a year, we actually take a special offering specifically. But we're budgeting all year to help with projects.
It sounds like you have to, this is not just a casual thing to find out these needs. Some of these needs are not mentioned in a prayer letter. It sounds like you have to make a phone call, you have to be in correspondence, you have to dig. Like, please tell me what you really need.
And usually, I'll just be very honest with you.
Yeah.
In this sense, the needs I want to meet are not the ones that someone is constantly presenting in a prayer letter.
Yeah.
There are men that rarely mention needs. Those are real, true, extreme needs. But others, it is being aware and speaking to these men, looking where they're at in their ministry. And roofs are a big deal because so many churches are having their people finance, whether that's Africa or Central America, and they can put up the blocks around the walls. But when you get to a roof for any country, that's a large expense. So we put a lot of roofs on a lot of buildings, and it just, that's at the point where they're weary and trying to figure out how do we cover this.
And that's the nudge.
Right, and it may be $10,000 or $30,000, but from that point, they can finish out the building. Yeah. So we've really invested a lot of money in roofs around the world.
Well, I appreciate your zeal for missions and how it's contagious and how other folks can see the need, give to the need, and go to meet the need as well. So I appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you for the time allowing me to mention it.
Well, make sure that you check out our other YouTube videos. Make sure that you like this video and you put a comment and that you share it with somebody who would be benefited by it. And then also make sure you check out the audio-only platforms as well. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you.